Hello, can you hear me? Hi, my name is Stephen Ying. Today I'm presenting on participatory AI on its theoretical foundations and its current state of practice. There's been a lot of recent interest in different forms of participation in designing AI systems, or to give a loose definition of AI, computational systems that learn from data. This interest spans technology companies such as OpenAI's call for democratic input to AI, nonprofits such as the recent initiatives by Ada Lovelace Institute, as well as academia, such as work by researchers like Mona Sloan, as well as workshops at ICML and CHI, among others. Overall, there is a growing consensus that stakeholders affected by AI systems should participate more in their design. Despite this consensus, it's hard to have a conversation on this topic. Very different goals and approaches are similarly branded as participatory AI. For instance, some practitioners take a community-led approach in defining community needs as the starting points, like the querying AI example from earlier. Others involve stakeholders as the human infrastructure. This comes in multiple forms, such as involving people in data generation, including them in data labeling and annotation, as well as engaging with them for feedback or optimization. Moving to a commercial context, industry practitioners involve stakeholders to help develop products that better align with their different wants and needs. However, these approaches and goals could not be more different. Currently, we lack a shared understanding that can help articulate the trade-offs between the different approaches and goals I just described. This makes it challenging to discuss the extent to which a particular approach achieves one's goals. As such, even when practitioners have good intention to empower stakeholders, they may still do things in ways that lead to pseudo-participation, where stakeholders lack agency decision-making and agenda setting, despite participating in the design process. To move beyond this conceptual model, we start by developing a framework that enables us to identify different goals and strategies for participatory AI. To do so, we reviewed existing literature on theories of participation across technology design, political theory, and the social sciences. The specific traditions we draw from are listed as follows, such as participatory design and social choice theory. You can read more about them in the paper. By synthesizing across these traditions, we identify 4 dimensions of participation. Why is participation needed? What is on the table? Who is involved? And what form does participation take? Then, in addition to the dimensions of participation, we identify 4 modes of participation that form the spectrum, from consult, include, collaborate, to own. We combine these 4 modes of participation with the 4 dimensions to develop our conceptual framework. Then, in order to understand how participatory AI is put into practice, we applied our framework to analyze the current landscape. First, we analyzed 80 research articles in which authors report making use of participatory methods for AI design. To develop our corpus, we identified articles for inclusion from popular AI and computer science venues based on the search terms related to participation in AI. You can read the paper for more details on our methods. From our analysis of the corpus, we found that participation remains largely consultative. First, we found that the motivating why is participation needed, the majority of projects describe their goal as improving the user experience or better align AI with stakeholders' preferences and values. But only 10% of the projects involve stakeholders with the goal of shaping the system's scope and purpose. In terms of what is on the table, the majority of projects surveyed focus their participatory interventions exclusively on informing the user interface, much like the goals we saw for participation. Only 10% of the projects allow stakeholders to provide input into the type of model and features used, the design of objective or loss functions, or the decision thresholds. In other words, only 10% of the projects give stakeholders a say in how the underlying model works. Furthermore, only 4 out of the 80 projects allow stakeholders to rule out AI as a solution, since the vast majority of projects were defined as AI projects in the first place. As it relates to who's involved, in 94% of the projects, the stakeholders were identified and chosen by project leads. In this case, stakeholders were recruited based on criteria predetermined by the project team. This contrasts with the much smaller number of projects that leverage a community-led approach in establishing relationships with stakeholder groups. Regarding forms of participation, 85% of the projects engage stakeholders in eliciting preferences. It's important to note that the majority of these projects engage with stakeholders only once, meaning that these high-level inputs, their preferences among a predetermined list of options, were the only input stakeholders provided. For these projects, participation primarily took place during designated windows once the system's scope and purpose were already determined, or were specifically scoped to aspects of the user interface, rather than the underlying AI model. So, what led to this consultative landscape? In order to understand how we got here, we interviewed 12 authors of papers from their corporates to understand their motivations, challenges, and aspirations of doing participatory AI. You can read the paper to see details about interviewees, backgrounds, and applications they worked in. Overall, our interviewees described the desire for substantive stakeholder participation as an ambitious but perhaps unrealistic goal. They described feeling caught between an idealized world of stakeholder empowerment and the top-down organizational constraints of available time and resources. To navigate between their ideals and constraints, the AI practitioners we interviewed turned to particular approaches to participation, which we describe as proxy-based participation. We identified 3 forms of proxy-based participation and their potential risks. First, when AI practitioners recruit stand-ins who represent the interests of affected groups, such as affinity groups with similar demographic backgrounds. However, it is not clear to what extent the recruited participants are in fact representative of the groups in question. Second, when UX and HDI practitioners serve as mediators between AI experts and domain stakeholders, there is a risk here that these experts may inadvertently elevate or augment some voices while leaving other voices out of the conversation. Third, when AI teams recruit stakeholders to train models by voting on preferences or outcomes and nominally reflecting their goals. This form of participation may narrowly limit stakeholders' input to predefined policies, preferences, or model outputs, as well as failing to capture people's changing values and preferences. We don't have the time to get into the first 2 today, but you can read the paper for more details. In particular, we found that algorithmic proxies encompass a significant subset of participatory methods from our corpus. The assumption underlying this approach, informed by social choice theory, holds that a predictive model trained on people's preferences is functionally equivalent to those preferences. However, this approach comes with its limitation. In one of our interviewees' case, they reported that by the end of the elicitation process, many of the values their stakeholders prioritized were very different from what they prioritized at the beginning. However, they did not retrain their model to capture their preferences. Looking back, they felt that designing a model that captures people's constantly evolving values was akin to, quote unquote, trying to hit a moving target. Even if that retraining occurs, algorithmic proxies are a very narrowly scoped avenue for participation, the choice of which models, preferences, and policies are being voted on or ranked is predetermined by the researchers a priori and not explicated as an object of participatory input. In the age of large language models, this issue is even more critical. Many researchers are turning to LLM to generate synthetic user data, where such data is posited as suitable proxies for understanding human experiences. Yet, This approach to modeling human preferences may fail to capture the contextual nuance and complexity of people's values, particularly if they're only voting on or ranking a narrowly scoped output from a model, as in reinforcement learning from human feedback. This contrasts with approaches like participatory design that engage people in envisioning how systems should be designed in the first place. Finally, drawing on these lessons, we discuss how the socio-technical complexity of AI systems raise unique challenges to meaningful participation. There's more in the paper, but for this presentation, I want to highlight one particular set of tensions that is characteristic of AI design and development between scaling and caring. Our work has asked how careful human interventions and scaling are often in tension with each other. In the context of AI design, this raises the question of if and how meaningful participation is possible at scale. Our findings suggest two sets of considerations for future researchers to contemplate. First, as AI systems these days are often applications of foundation models, it becomes useful to think about the distinction between participating in application design, such as in the form of third-party applications or APIs, and participating in model design. In the case of the latter, this would mean directly shaping models like GPT-4, yet the extent to which stakeholders can meaningfully contribute to system-wide decisions on this level remains to be explored. Second, as AI systems are inherently adaptive, it raises critical questions about when and how often and by which means it makes sense to bring stakeholders into the loop. For instance, while co-design workshops are set up to empower stakeholders, researchers should be mindful that it is a lot, indeed, to ask people to attend such workshops, just like how it takes a lot to attend public hearings and town hall meetings. As a closing remark, I want to offer a pragmatist view on how it can move the field forward. Instead of focusing on the idealized aspirations of participatory approaches, we suggest conceptualizing participation as a set of dimensions that needs to be explicitly specified at project level. This means moving away from conceptualizing participation as an all or nothing characteristic, or claiming that every approach involving stakeholders is equally participatory. Rather, we encourage practitioners to be proactive and intentional about how much agency is meant to be provided to effective stakeholders at each stage. The conceptual framework we derive would be a useful tool to aid in this reflexive process and can be used by others to evaluate claims about participations to ensure that the methods used are aligned with the intended goals. We hope our framework and findings will be useful in helping make sense of the conceptual model around participatory AI and ensure that we're realistic in what we're claiming about our methods as we work toward the goal of full stakeholder ownership over AI design. I would love to chat more during the conference if people are interested. The paper is currently live on ACN Digital Library. Please feel free to reach out. Thank you.